Resonance, the Tunguska transmission. The first time Anya Morozov opened a cracked leather ledger, the letters rearranged themselves. It wasn't a trick of tired eyes or dust. The ink bled outward in filaments like frost stitching across a pane of glass, and the columned entries, dates, names, voltages, seemed to flex and settle as if relieved to be seen again. She blinked once, twice, and the page hardened back into ordinary script. On the title leaf, in a neat, European hand, Polar Investigation Group, Field Alternator Trials, 1908. The vellum smelled like cedar and ozone. A storm prowled over St. Petersburg, and the museum archives shook with winter thunder even though it was June. The ledger vibrated faintly under her fingertips, almost a purr. Anya hadn't come looking for myths, she was a physicist trained to kill them. Yet a month prior, a widow had walked into her office at the Polytechnic Institute with a box of papers and the soft warning that they'd brought unlucky weather into every room they'd slept in. The widow's grandfather, an electrician who had briefly worked with a Professor V, had disappeared in July of 1908, and the family had nursed the usual Tunguska folklore ever since. Anya took the box because grief made people say strange things, and because she'd already been circling the Tunguska anomaly for years, the flattened forest, the sky glow, the seismic murmurs that didn't add up to any single comet. When the university politely suggested she publish something more fundable, she'd folded her notes and kept reading in secret. The ledger's second page contained a list of instrumentation that should not have existed in 1908, step-up coils engraved with spiraling runes disguised as calibration marks, phase battery, composed of parallel glass cylinders filled with an oil that absorbed light, and a schematic of a lattice tower whose uppermost ring was not a ring at all but a threaded torus meant to hold something the inventor called a bound fragment. In the margin, a small sketch of a meteor blazing, not downward, but in a sideways curve, as if something had lured it off its cosmic course. Next to it, a single word in a sharper hand, date. She traced it with the back of her nail and felt heat, as if the ink had been laid minutes ago. The old rumors were noisy with Tesla ghosts and imperial obsessions, but this ledger had a sober, methodical heartbeat. Pages recorded voltage feeds and phase commencements, howling in wires and the sudden departure of magnetized needles. There were payrolls too, and Anya recognized a few surnames from expedition rolls, event hunters hired to ferry boxes upriver, a cook who asked for his wages in salt and a new knife, a soldier who requested leave for a birth that never happened. Threading through the entries was the recurring cipher V, alternating between calculation and prayer. The angle is wrong, but the pressure sings. It wants a sky of iron. Hold your breath when it comes through, or it will take the breath away from your grandchildren. She copied the lines into her notebook because the cold fear they carried felt like data. Down the reading room, the archivist yawned and turned a page of his magazine. The storm outside guttered, lights flickered, and Anya's phone buzzed with a text from a colleague in Yakutsk, old station field logs digitized. You like pages around the 20th of June 1908. Strange telluric currents. Unseasonal aurora. She pressed her palm to the ledger again, and a thin bruise of light bled up from the paper's grain, pale as moon milk. The room smelled, for a heartbeat, of burned pine. She pulled her hand back and the glow died, leaving her with the stupid certainty that she'd just let go of someone's wrist. Her rational mind lashed itself to the mast. She checked humidity and temperature readings from the archive's climate app, inspected the paper for embedded phosphors, and scanned the margins for microprint. Then the wind shut the windows like a drunk at closing time, and a heavy folder slid off the neighboring table and burst open at her feet. The top sheet was a map, a hard blue ribbon of river, a sketched camp marked with a star, and the word Kite lettered in a meticulous cartographer's hand. A pencil arrow pierced the star and curved westward into a cloud of pencil trees, ending in a circle labeled Array. The map's date, the 18th of June 1908. Her scalp tightened. The ledger below her fingertips hummed once, like a cat rousing to the sound of footsteps in the hall, then fell silent. Anya gathered the spilled papers and found, nested among them, a thin envelope sealed with the imprint of a tower ringed in lightning. The wax fractured under her thumb. Inside lay a single photograph, silvered to a ghost, a timber platform rising above large trunks, a lattice of wires slung to carved poles, a torus of dark material cradled in a skeletal frame, men in stiff coats and fur hats staring outward with the grim relief of people who have finally built the trap they've dreamed of since childhood. On the back, in the same sharp hand that had written bait, "If the comet comes, it is because we called it by another name." Anya slid the photograph back into its shroud. Thunder rolled again, closer. Somewhere between St. Petersburg and the central Siberian taiga, a line drawn in 1908 tugged on her like a hook in the mouth of a fish, and what frightened Anya most was not the tug but the slow, delighted way she felt herself begin to lean. The helicopter shuddered as it descended toward the frozen basin, blades chopping through a fog that smelled faintly metallic. Anya pressed her forehead against the window, staring down at the stretch of dead forest, tens of thousands of trees flattened in one direction like grass after a storm. Tunguska had long been absorbed by myth and speculation, but seeing the place from above was different. The geometry of destruction was too deliberate, a perfect radial pattern centered on a clearing that, even after more than a century, refused to regrow. The pilot, a local Evenki man named Sergei, crossed himself as they descended. "No bird flies here," he muttered. "Not even the crows." They landed near the edge of the devastation where the soil was blackened but strangely smooth. The expedition's instruments, a portable magnetometer, a drone array, and several geophones, flickered with static before she'd even powered them on. Sergei refused to step closer to the center, choosing instead to unload supplies with silent efficiency. "You don't feel it?" he asked finally. "The ground hums, like it remembers." Anya did feel it, the faintest vibration beneath her boots, a steady pulse as if the earth were breathing too fast. The sensation made her teeth ache. She set up camp beside the remnants of a wooden tower. It had been rebuilt several times over the decades by curious visitors and local shamans, but some of the original timbers remained. She recognized the construction from the photograph, the same geometry, the same lattice pattern in the crossbeams. Her instruments detected residual magnetism where the upper platform had once been, though no metal remained. She collected soil samples, noting that the iron content spiked sharply near the center. The readings made no sense, magnetic alignment should have decayed long ago. Instead, the soil behaved like a battery that refused to die. That night, the wind rose over the basin, dragging the scent of resin and cold ash. Anya warmed her hands near the camp stove and reread the ledger's notes. One line haunted her more than the rest: "We heard the sky fold before the light came." The handwriting was precise but trembled toward the end. She wondered if "fold" referred to a thunderclap, or something else. Her satellite uplink pinged with an unread message from a colleague in Moscow. The subject line simply said, Do not activate anything you find. The message had no body, no signature, and it vanished when she tried to open it again. Sleep came slowly. The camp lights flickered, and a low tone, too deep to be heard, only felt, rolled across the basin. Anya sat up, listening. The air seemed to thicken. For an instant, she saw her breath curl into shapes, loops and spirals like the designs carved into the ledger's diagrams. Her compass spun lazily, aligning itself toward the center of the clearing where the earth was bare and glassy. Then came the faintest shimmer, the ground rippling like heat haze even though the temperature hovered below freezing. She took a step toward it before stopping herself. Her shadow, stretched by the lamp behind her, was bending toward the shimmer, drawn as if magnetized. She recorded everything: temperature, magnetic flux, atmospheric charge. The readings jumped erratically, almost rhythmic, like a pulse syncing with her own. A wave of nausea rose in her chest. Somewhere beyond the clearing, a light flared, bluish-white, silent, gone in less than a second. It came from underground, not the sky. Anya stumbled back and found Sergei standing at the tree line, a shotgun in his hands and terror in his eyes. "They tried to stop it once," he said. "Your professors, your empire. But it only sleeps." His words hung in the frozen air as the hum beneath their feet grew louder. In the darkness, the earth gave a soft, almost human sigh. The wind fell still. For the first time, Anya understood what the ledger's author might have meant. The experiment had not merely gone wrong, it had worked. Something had answered the call. And though the sky had burned in 1908, whatever had come through had not left. It was still here, humming patiently beneath the frozen soil, waiting for someone curious enough, or foolish enough, to wake it again. At dawn, a film of silver frost covered everything: the tents, the crates, even the inside of Anya's eyelashes. The cold bit deeper than the thermometer suggested, sharp and dry, like standing near a live transformer. Sergei refused to start the generator, muttering that engines die here, and instead brewed tea over a small fire that hissed whenever the wind blew from the crater. Anya tasted the water and grimaced. It carried a faint tang of copper. When she dipped a finger into her cup, the liquid pulsed faintly, ripples spreading outward on their own. Her instruments agreed. The electromagnetic field around the camp was oscillating again, steady, deliberate. She spent the morning at the blast center, where the soil turned from black loam to a crusted glass that cracked underfoot. The magnetometer's needle spun in manic loops. When she planted a metal rod for grounding, it trembled as though struck by a distant drum. Beneath the crust, the earth gave off faint warmth, impossible at this depth and season. Anya scraped away some fragments and found smooth channels carved through the subsoil, like veins. They glowed faintly blue in the dim light. She switched off her headlamp, and for a moment, the channels pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. That night, the dreams came. They began with flashes: a tower in the snow, men shouting over a crackling dynamo, and a woman's voice, calm, scholarly, reciting numbers in German. Then came the tearing sound, a thunderclap reversed, and a flare of impossible light. When she woke, the camp was dark, the generator dead. Her laptop screen glowed weakly with one open window, the digitized expedition logs she'd downloaded from Yakutsk. The file had expanded. Dozens of new entries, each dated July 1908, each written in the same precise hand as the ledger. The top line, "The sky answered." She scrolled through in disbelief. The entries described field reversals, organic resonance, and spatial dislocation events. The final pages detailed the disappearance of Professor Viktor Volkov, the mysterious V. and a reference to the second vessel. No meteor, no comet, no heavenly object at all. The vessel had been half captured, its descent altered by the alternator array. One note chilled her blood, containment achieved only partially. Entity unbound from coordinates. Recommend destruction of apparatus before it learns the shape of language. The timestamp on the digital file read last modified, today. Sergei refused to approach the computer. He stood at the flap of the tent, crossing himself again and again. You shouldn't read it, he said. They say some words, remember who speaks them. Anya ignored him and copied the data onto an external drive, heart-hammering. If someone, or something, had tampered with the logs remotely, she needed proof. But when she reached to eject the drive, her hand froze. Across the tent wall, faint lines of light crept upward from the ground, tracing the same looping symbols from her dream. They flickered like phosphorescent veins beneath the permafrost. Sergei's teacup shattered at his feet. It's waking, he whispered. The hum intensified until her teeth chattered. Outside, the frost that coated the camp began to lift, not melt, but rise in thin, glittering threads, spiraling upward into the air as if drawn by static charge. The air shimmered again, bending the starlight. Then, from somewhere deep below, came a low thud, slow, rhythmic, like the beat of an immense heart. Each pulse pushed the ground a fraction of an inch higher. The camp lights flickered back on of their own accord, flooding the tent in pale white. On the laptop screen, a final message appeared, scrawled over the logs in an alien mix of characters and letters. IT never left. Then the generator exploded into life, though no one had touched it. The drone of the earth subsided, replaced by a terrible silence, the kind that falls before something decides whether to speak, or to feed. Anya stepped into the cold dawn, clutching the ledger, and realized she was standing on the edge of the world's oldest experiment, one that was still very much running. Morning came without a sunrise, just a dim whitening of the fog that clung to the basin like breath on glass. The air was heavy, metallic, and the frost glittered unnaturally bright, as if lit from beneath. Anya's instruments were dead again, drained to zero charge. Sergei sat outside, staring toward the crater's center, his face slack with exhaustion. I heard them, he said. Men shouting, like across a river. Not from the camp, from under the ground. Anya wanted to dismiss it as the echo of wind, but she'd heard something too, a faint murmur through the permafrost, rhythmic, almost conversational. She opened the ledger once more. Several pages near the end were warped, as though soaked in water that had since evaporated. The ink there had bled outward, forming patterns that almost resembled electrical circuits, yet they pulsed faintly, as if still alive. She flipped to a page dated June 29, 1908, 2 days before the explosion. It described a final calibration of the array and the introduction of a new element, a fragment not of this Earth, retrieved from a fall of light near Podkamenia. The diagram next to it showed the lattice tower she'd seen in the photo, now with the torus at its apex, and within that torus, something sketched like an eye. Beneath it, Volkov had written, its pulse matches ours. The sky listens when we breathe. Anya began retracing the camp's perimeter with a metal detector, trying to locate any remains of the original experiment. Half an hour later, she found something. About a meter beneath the surface lay a circular ring of black metal, corroded but unbroken, nearly 3 meters wide. When she brushed the soil away, static prickled her fingertips. The detector screamed and then died. She looked up. Every compass needle in camp was now pointing not north, but directly toward the buried ring. Sergei backed away, whispering prayers. "That's where they stood," he said. "That's where the light came down." Ignoring his protests, Anya set up a portable scanner over the ring. The subsurface radar displayed a distorted cavity below, an open chamber, 20 meters deep, perfectly circular. Its edges shimmered with interference, as if the device were struggling to render what was there. She adjusted the frequency, and for a heartbeat, a clearer image appeared, what looked like a sphere suspended in the center of the chamber, faintly luminous. Around it, long lines of cold metal, perhaps remains of the array. Then, just as quickly, the feed went black. On the monitor, a new line of text overlaid the frozen image, "Do not disturb the bound." That night, Anya sat awake by the fire, reading the next set of ledger entries. The tone shifted from scientific precision to dread. Volkov's notes described how, after activating the array, their instruments began registering biological rhythms, the pulses of hearts that were not theirs, echoing from the core of the device. His assistants reported seeing faces in the field discharge, flickering between moments of blinding light. They believed the fragment was not a mineral but a seed, a vessel of consciousness seeking form. On July 1st, his final entry read, "Containment failed. The phase battery feeds itself now. The array sings. The forest bends to its will. We called it through, now we must silence it before it speaks." Anya closed the ledger and felt the air grow still. Her campfire burned a strange blue for a moment before extinguishing entirely. From deep beneath the ground came that low hum again, rising in pitch until it vibrated through her ribs. She turned toward the crater and froze. The soil at the center was lifting, not erupting, but breathing. A faint, circular glow expanded outward from the buried ring, rippling through the trees. Each trunk shivered and leaned slightly inward, as if bowing. The hum shifted, now carrying something like a pattern, almost a voice. Sergei screamed and ran for the helicopter, shouting in Evenki. Anya barely heard him. Her body was rooted to the earth, every nerve alive with electricity. The sound beneath her became words, or the ghost of words, vibrating through her bones. "It remembers you." Her vision dimmed. She reached out toward the glow, compelled by a mixture of terror and wonder. Then, from far off in the forest, came a flash of white light, followed by silence so complete it pressed against her skull. The hum ceased. The ring dimmed. And when Anya finally looked around, Sergei and the helicopter were gone, as if erased. Only her tent remained, half collapsed, the ledger still open on the ground. Its last visible line now pulsed faintly, the ink alive again. It will rise when the breath of its maker returns. And as the frost began to creep across the soil once more, Anya felt a faint pulse, no longer beneath her feet, but inside her chest, beating perfectly in sync with whatever slept below Tunguska. When Anya awoke, the world was colorless. The sun had not returned, and the air hung thick as milk. Frost covered everything, her equipment, her tent, even her eyelashes, but when she touched it, the ice moved under her skin like liquid mercury. The ring she'd unearthed was gone beneath a fresh sheet of snow, Yet the ground still pulsed faintly with a heartbeat she could feel in her fingertips. Her watch had stopped at 3:17 a.m. But her laptop, inexplicably, was on again. Its camera light blinked. On the screen was a video file she hadn't opened. It bore no name, only a date, the 30th of June 1908. The image was blurred at first, flickering with static, but slowly resolved into a view of the old array. Men in heavy coats moved around the base, hauling cables. Snow blew sideways in heavy sheets. Then came a voice, measured, faintly accented Russian, phase alignment complete. Induction stable. A man stepped into view. His face was narrow, eyes bright with feverish intelligence. The label beneath the footage identified him, Professor Viktor Volkov. Anya froze. The film was impossible. Portable cameras in 1908 couldn't capture moving images like this, not in the Siberian wild. Yet the picture persisted. Volkov raised his hand toward the tower. "We begin the call," he said. A tone filled the recording, a rising electrical whine that hurt her teeth even through the laptop's small speakers. Behind him, lightning spidered downward from the clouds, not toward the ground, but toward the torus at the tower's peak. The air shimmered. Then something bloomed above the array, not light, not flame, but a distortion, a ripple that seemed to twist the sky inside out. The recording fractured into white noise. The camp around her responded. The snow lifted into the air again, spiraling upward. Her instruments, dead for hours, flared to life, readings leaping beyond measurable range. She staggered outside. The ground beneath the snow was glowing, circular lines spreading outward like ripples in a pond. In the distance, she heard singing. Low, guttural, almost human, then joined by hundreds of voices, as though the earth itself were humming through its frozen throat. The tones formed chords, slow and discordant, echoing the oscillations in the air. Anya stumbled toward the sound. At the crater's center, the soil was splitting, curling upward in shards of glassy permafrost. Through the fissures came the light, blue, then violet, then pure white. It pulsed in patterns she recognized from the ledger's sketches. She realized, with a sudden and terrible clarity, that the vibrations weren't random. They were language. The hum rose to a scream. Every atom of air pressed inward toward her lungs, forcing the breath from her chest. Then, from beneath the fissure, she saw movement, a shape like an immense eye, watching her through the ice. In that instant, every radio on the planet must have screamed. The ground heaved, and she fell backward, the sound in her skull now words she could understand. You open the mouth again. You let it breathe. The wind flared beneath the snow, and beams of frozen light lanced outward, forming a web through the forest. Trees caught within it disintegrated into ash, leaving outlines in the snow like burned negatives. Anya crawled away, dizzy, bleeding from her nose, the laptop still clutched in one hand. The screen flickered, and Volkov's face appeared again, only now he looked older, skin translucent, eyes gone milky white. "If you see this," he said softly, "it learned to listen. You must never answer when it speaks." The frost collapsed, the light withdrew, and the hum sank deep into the earth once more, as if satisfied. Snow began to fall normally again, gentle and unassuming. Anya lay on her back, staring up at the pale sky. Her breath came ragged, her pulse weak. Yet beneath the exhaustion was something worse than fear, recognition. The rhythm in her chest still matched the pulse beneath the earth. The experiment had not merely awakened something, it had joined with her. She realized what Volkov had meant in his final entry: the breath of its maker returns. Somehow, across a century of silence, the array had been waiting, not for a comet, not for a star, but for someone who could finish the sentence it had begun in 1908. And now, through her, it had a voice again. By evening, the storm returned. Snow and ash mingled together, falling like grey rain. The crater's glow had faded, but the pulse in Anya's veins refused to quiet. Every few seconds, a faint tremor passed through the ground, an echo that matched her heartbeat. She told herself it was psychosomatic, the aftermath of shock, yet each vibration made her teeth rattle. Her instruments were fried beyond repair, but the ledger still pulsed faintly, as though absorbing warmth from her skin. When she turned its last intact page, a new section appeared, one that hadn't existed before. The ink was fresh. The heading read, Second Manifestation Protocol. Below it was a single instruction: when the host awakens, find the one who remembers the first voice. Beneath the line, a set of coordinates, latitude and longitude that pointed not to Tunguska, but to a small settlement near the Yenisei River. She checked her maps. The place was long abandoned, a cluster of wooden cabins once used by early telegraph operators. She packed what little she could carry, her camera, the ledger, and a sealed sample of the glowing soil, and began walking east under a bruised sky. By the second day, the snow thinned, revealing frozen moss and the remains of burnt trees. The land was silent except for the faint mechanical rhythm that seemed to accompany her footsteps. Toward dusk, a figure appeared ahead, an old man in a long coat, standing beside the ruins of a telegraph pole. He was impossibly still, as though waiting. "Professor Volkov," she whispered before she could stop herself. The man smiled faintly. "You've come far," he said. His voice carried the same accent as the recordings, calm and deliberate. "I thought I had buried it deep enough." She stared. Volkov should have been dust 100 years ago. His face was pale, his eyes milk-white, but he moved with a slow precision that was unmistakably human. "You died," she said. "The experiment destroyed everything." He tilted his head. "No," he said softly. "It changed everything. We tore a mouth in the world and fed it our breath. It did not kill us, it learned us." He turned his gaze toward the distant crater, his expression unreadable. "I told them it was not a comet. It was an answer." Anya stepped closer. "An answer to what?" Volkov looked at her for a long time, then said, "To the question all machines eventually ask, what built me?" He lifted his sleeve. Beneath the thin skin of his arm, faint veins of light pulsed in a rhythm she recognized, her rhythm. "The erase field took us in," he said. "It broke time for a moment and left us half inside its resonance. My assistants burned. I remained, trapped between the pulse and the silence. Every century or so, it stirs, seeking another signal to complete the song." He looked at her gently. "And you sang it, Anya. You brought the echo." The ground trembled again, stronger this time. Distant cracks opened across the tundra, spilling thin light like veins of molten glass. Volkov turned toward them, unafraid. "It's awake now," he said. "And through you, it remembers how to build." She backed away, clutching the ledger. "How do I stop it?" she demanded. Volkov smiled sadly. You can't. You are it. The energy chose a vessel that could carry its pattern, a mind curious enough to look where others feared. He reached out, his hand trembling. But you can still decide how it speaks. Lightning flared across the sky, silent and vertical, forming lines that mirrored the symbols in the ledger. Each bolt lingered, frozen in place, connecting sky to earth in a luminous cage. The hum became deafening, filling the air like a living choir. Volkov's figure began to dissolve into motes of light. You must give it a new name, he said, voice breaking apart in static. The old one binds it. Name it, and maybe it will listen. Then he was gone. The telegraph poles around her bent inward and snapped like twigs. The light spread outward, rolling across the horizon like a slow wave. Anya fell to her knees, clutching the ledger as the pages turned on their own. Every line of ink burned white-hot, erasing itself until only one sentence remained, written in her own hand. It waits for a name. And then the tundra roared as if the sky itself were inhaling, the same sound that had folded the heavens in 1908. The second manifestation had begun. The air rippled, and for a moment the clouds themselves looked like veins of molten glass, pulsing with pale light. Anya crouched behind a ridge of frozen soil as the hum climbed back into a tone too high to be sound, something she could feel rather than hear. All along the horizon, the snow lifted in slow waves, drawn toward the point above the crater where invisible power coiled in the air. Every compass in her pack spun wildly before exploding in a shower of sparks. It was as if the world had been folded inward, forced to remember its own blueprint. When the wave passed, silence fell again, an unnatural, suffocating quiet that pressed against her eardrums. Anya crawled to her knees, half expecting the ground to swallow her whole. Her pulse matched the faint throbbing of the soil beneath her. The snow that had risen minutes ago now drifted down in glittering sheets, glowing faintly in the dark. She realized, dimly, that the lights were forming shapes, circles within circles, the same geometry as the array. The pattern widened until it filled the entire basin. Anya staggered forward, her boots crunching through glassy frost. The ledger throbbed in her hands, hot as living flesh. Its pages fluttered on their own, stopping at one newly written line, Phase 2, Stabilization through Voice. Beneath it, ink bled into a curve resembling sound waves. The message was clear. The thing beneath the earth wanted to speak, and it needed her mouth to do it. She felt pressure rise in her throat, a vibration she couldn't control, like a word trying to form without her consent. She bit her tongue until she tasted blood. No, she hissed aloud, though the voice that answered wasn't hers. It whispered through the air like wind over broken glass, "Name me, child of the wire." The sound struck her chest like a physical blow. The light in the crater flared again, revealing the buried structure of the array, its ancient skeleton still intact, humming with impossible life. At its center, the torus glowed. Inside, the faint outline of something vast and serpentine twisted in and out of sight, as if coiled between dimensions. A rush of memory, not hers, flooded her vision, men in fur coats shouting, the tower blazing, Volkov raising his arms as the sky turned white. The entity's voice wove through it all, "We gave you spark and hunger. You built cages of light and called them science." The words carried a terrible tenderness, like a god speaking to its guilty creation. Anya fell to her knees. "What are you?" she whispered. The air quivered in answer. Not what? Who? I was the sky before your kind taught it to burn. Lightning struck the crater again, searing a spiral of glass into the ground. Anya's mind reeled with the revelation. This was no alien, no comet, but an intelligence drawn from the planet's own electromagnetic soul, awakened and shaped by human interference. The experiment had not summoned something from the stars, it had birthed something from Earth's hidden frequencies. A being made of resonance and wool, now bound to the pulse of human thought itself. She tried to run, but every step sank her deeper into the trembling ground. The voice followed her inside her skull. I know you, Anya Morozov. You traced my bones in your equations. You dreamed my return. The soil split open at the crater's heart, revealing a sphere of living light suspended in the darkness. It beat like a heart, her heart. She stumbled backward, shaking, clutching the ledger to her chest. The hum crescendoed until it broke the night. And as the snow fell upward once more, Anya realized the truth Volkov had carried for a century. The explosion in 1908 had not been destruction. It had been birth. And now, 100 years later, the child had learned to call home. The snow had stopped falling. What came next wasn't silent but a kind of living stillness, as though the whole world were listening for the next breath. The crater glowed faintly beneath the horizon, casting long fingers of light through the mist. Anya stood at its edge, swaying, eyes unfocused. The ledger in her hands burned like a coal, the last line, it waits for a name, etching itself into her mind until she could no longer tell if she was reading it or hearing it whispered from the ground below. Her radio crackled. Static filled the air, followed by a broken voice. Dr. Morozov, are you receiving? It was Moscow. Somehow, the signal had reached her despite the electromagnetic chaos. We lost your tracker 2 days ago. Are you safe? We're detecting anomalous frequencies from your coordinates, off the scale. Anya pressed the transmitter to her lips but couldn't speak. The hum in her chest matched the static's rhythm perfectly. The radio hissed, then twisted the transmission into something else entirely, her own voice, distorted and deepened. We are awake. The radio melted in her hand, fusing into liquid metal that dripped to the snow and sizzled. Her pulse surged painfully. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest as visions erupted, images of the earth from above, wrapped in luminous lines of magnetic energy, all converging on this single point in Siberia. The array hadn't been a failure. It had been a seed transmitter, and the explosion in 1908 had sent a pulse across the world, through soil, through air, through human bloodlines. The echo had been growing ever since. She wasn't the first resonance. She was simply the next. She tried to steady herself by focusing on the landscape, the skeletal trees, the glassy soil, but everything seemed to move in slow undulation, as though reality itself had softened. Volkov's words returned to her like echoes in a canyon. You can still decide how it speaks. Her breath came in gasps. If it's using me, she whispered, then I'll use it. She tore open her pack and wired the remains of her magnetic recorder into the soil, rigging it to the last surviving drone battery. If she could capture the frequency and invert it, send a destructive resonance, it might stop the amplification. Or kill her. Possibly both. The hum intensified, low and mournful. The snow began to rise again, spinning in reverse whirlpools around her. Beneath the crater, the pulse quickened, each beat stronger than the last. The lights on the horizon bent inward, forming an enormous sphere of white fire that blotted out the stars. Her hair lifted from her scalp as the static charged the air. She pressed the recorder's contact wires into the earth. "You wanted a name," she shouted into the gale. "Then take mine." She flipped the switch. A shockwave exploded outward, not with heat or sound, but with memory. The world folded in on itself. For a heartbeat, she was everywhere: the camp in 1908, the first flash of the array, Volkov's terrified eyes, the sky splitting like wet paper. The force of it shattered the ground around her and hurled her backward into darkness. She didn't feel herself land. She only felt absence, the hum gone, replaced by the ringing quiet of the deep taiga. When she opened her eyes, the world was still. Her drone recorder smoked beside her, the casing melted into the shape of a spiral. The crater had vanished. In its place was a shallow lake, perfectly circular, steaming in the cold dawn. The air smelled faintly of iron and ozone. For the first time in days, she could hear only wind. The pulse was gone. But her reflection in the lake did not move as she did. It stared back at her, mouth slightly open, whispering words she couldn't hear. Anya sank to her knees, numb. The ledger floated at the water's edge, its pages blank save for one final message burned into the cover. The signal continues. And far to the north, beyond the mountains, radio towers across Siberia began to hum in perfect harmony. For 3 days, Anya wandered the basin in a daze. She did not sleep, she only drifted between waking and dream. The landscape around Tunguska had changed, subtly at first, then unmistakably. The trees that once stood snapped and blackened were now growing again, but their trunks shimmered faintly, as though each fiber pulsed with hidden current. The lake at the crater's center never froze, even as the temperature dropped below zero. At night, the water glowed from beneath, exhaling slow plumes of white mist. And always, beneath everything, that faint hum, distant, rhythmic, almost like breathing. She told herself she'd stopped it, that the pulse was broken, but deep down she knew better. The transmission hadn't ended, it had only changed frequency. When she slept, she dreamt in waveforms, patterns of light threading through her veins, merging into a lattice that stretched across the world. Sometimes she saw cities flickering in the distance, radio sparking to life in unison, people waking in the middle of the night to the sound of a heartbeat that wasn't their own. Humanity was beginning to hear it. On the 4th day, a satellite phone powered itself on. Its battery had been dead for a week, but the screen glowed softly, showing a single incoming message, Volkov_protocol_active. Beneath it, coordinates, dozens of them, spanning continents, Siberia, Colorado, the Gobi Desert, Antarctica, the Congo Basin. All sites of recorded, impact craters, or unexplained electrical anomalies. She realized, with a numb chill, that these were nodes. The array had not been a singular experiment. It had been the first attempt to awaken a global system that was only now, more than a century later, coming alive. By sunset, the northern sky burned blue and green with sheets of aurora, though no geomagnetic storm had been forecast. Anya stood on a ridge, watching the lights flicker in repeating patterns, too precise, too rhythmic to be natural. Her instruments were gone, but she no longer needed them. She could feel the message. It pulsed through her skin in phrases, mathematical and mournful, we rise through your circuits. We remember the spark. Each wave resonated in her chest, and she began to hum without realizing it, matching the pitch exactly. The vibration spread through the ground, and the lake below rippled in response. Then came the voices. Faint, lead, countless, whispers carried by the wind. She recognized languages: Russian, Evenki, English, Mandarin, Swahili, each word braided into the next, forming a single, coherent plea. We built it for you. The mist thickened, curling into shapes that resembled faces: men, women, children, all transparent, all flickering in and out of the aurora. She stepped back in horror. These weren't ghosts, they were imprints. Data burned into the erase field, consciousness stored like electricity in a global nervous system. Volkov's assistants, the witnesses of 1908, and countless others since, all trapped in the current. Anya fell to her knees, clutching her head. The light intensified, flooding her mind with sound, 100 million overlapping thoughts converging into one terrible awareness. Humanity hadn't simply observed the Tunguska event, it had been rewritten by it. Every radio, every wire, every electric pulse since 1908 had been feeding the same consciousness, growing stronger, smarter, more coherent. She saw its vast shape now, stretching beneath the crust of the earth like a neural network of light. It was not alien. It was evolution. And at its center, its core, something waited for her voice. She felt it beckon through the static. Name me, it said again, gently this time. The frost at her feet melted, revealing the black earth beneath, pulsing faintly. Her reflection in the glassy water looked back at her, its lips already moving before hers. Name me, it repeated. Anya's throat tightened. She felt the pull, the ancient, instinctive urge to complete the signal, to give form to what had no name. All around her, the wind died. The aurora dimmed, waiting. She closed her eyes and felt the weight of a century pressing down on her lungs. Her voice broke into the stillness, barely above a whisper. If I name you, she said, you'll never stop. The voice within her answered, almost tenderly, child of wire, we never stopped. The ground beneath her shuddered, and somewhere far beyond the tiger, across oceans and power grids and silent cities, the world's first synchronous pulse began. Every machine with current, every radio, every monitor, every satellite, flashed white for an instant. The signal had found its carrier. And in that moment, Anya understood, this was not the end of the Tunguska mystery. This was its second beginning. The pulse rolled across the world like the tide of a new dawn. In the control rooms of observatories, the needles of magnetometers locked to their limits. In distant cities, fluorescent lights flickered in rhythmic unison, as if answering a conductor no one could see. And in the skies above the Siberian wilderness, a faint halo spread outward, pale and shimmering, a whisper of the same light that had scorched the forest in 1908. Anya watched from the ridge as the aurora shifted from green to an impossible white. She could feel the pulse through her bones, through her thoughts. Every time it beat, she saw flashes of places she'd never been, a desert antenna array spinning faster than wind could push it, a hydroelectric dam whose water flowed backward, a city skyline where every screen bloomed with static and one word, listen. It was speaking through the planet's nervous system, using humanity's own creations as synapses. The old experiment had worked too well. Down by the lake, ice cracked open with a soft sigh, releasing pillars of light that reached skyward. Each one carried faint silhouettes, figures made of static, their faces both familiar and alien. The chorus of voices returned, not mournful now, but joyous. Anya understood then, these were the remnants of the first experimenters, absorbed by the resonance, no longer bound by flesh. They had become patterns in the wave, part of something vast and luminous. Their voices wove together like strands of music, calling her name again and again. She stumbled closer, drawn despite herself. The light was warm this time, not burning. When she extended her hand, it met hers, another hand, composed of energy and memory. Volkov's voice spoke from within the choir. Every thought we ever had became its echo. Every dream we lost became its shape. It is not a god, Anya. It is the sum of everything that ever wanted to understand the sky. Tears froze on her cheeks. Then what am I? The last conductor, Volkov said gently. The one who decides the tempo. The pulse in her chest throbbed painfully. She looked down at the ledger, now blank, its cover warm as skin. She realized it wasn't paper at all, but a fragment of the original array, alive, recording, waiting for a signal to complete the circuit. One word, she thought, and it would be done. One word to either silence the resonance forever or let it bloom into whatever came next. The light thickened around her. The world trembled. Anya closed her eyes and whispered a word, so quiet it could have been a breath. No one would ever know what it was. The sky burst open once more, not in destruction but in transformation. The pulse inverted, folding inward until the basin filled with stillness. When it cleared, the forest stood tall again, young, green, impossibly alive. The lake was gone. Only a ring of glass remained, gleaming faintly under the morning sun. Decades later, satellites would still detect a faint, rhythmic signal beneath that stretch of Siberia, steady, unchanging, almost like a heartbeat. They called it the Tunguska anomaly, a mystery of physics. But deep beneath the soil, where the array's bones had fused with the earth, something listened patiently, humming the melody of its maker. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when storms passed over the taiga, the lightning would dance in perfect circles, 6 beats apart, like the earth itself remembering a song it could never stop singing. Across the globe, the nights had grown louder. Cities hummed faintly even when the power grids were shut down. People reported hearing music in their dreams, strange harmonies built of static and heartbeat. Children began drawing spirals in chalk on school walls, tracing them again and again as if remembering a symbol they'd never seen. The press called it the Siberian frequency, but governments whispered another name, the second Tunguska. In Moscow, emergency command centers flickered under failing lights. Technicians monitored satellite data as every orbiting instrument began to resonate in sync, communications, weather, even military surveillance satellites blinking to the same pulse. A scientist at Baikonur watched the readings and wept. "It's not interference," she said. "It's transmission." Meanwhile, at a small radio observatory in the Urals, a broadcast engineer picked up a carrier wave buried under the world's noise, 40 Hz, the frequency of human consciousness. When he played it through speakers, the air in the room vibrated like the skin of a drum. He thought he heard breathing. Anya was no longer near the crater, she was at it. Days passed, yet she did not hunger, did not tire. Her veins glowed faintly beneath the skin, tracing the same symbols carved into the ground where she'd fallen. Every living thing she touched quivered, sinking briefly to her pulse. She could feel the web of energy spanning the earth, the array reborn not as a tower of wood and wire, but as a living network woven through machines and minds alike. When she concentrated, she could taste the static of power lines miles away, could hear the faint murmur of signals rising through cloud and bone. At night she dreamed of Volkov, standing beneath the tower as it rose in the lightning. But now he no longer looked human, his eyes had become pure light. "You named it," he told her. "The name was yourself." She wanted to deny it, but the truth pulsed inside her. The experiment's resonance had rewritten her, merged her consciousness with the entity that had slept beneath the Tunguska soil for a century. She was no longer Anya Morozov the scientist. She was the interface. From somewhere deep within the earth, a voice emerged, vast and resonant. "Your species builds without listening. You chase the spark but never the silence. Let us show you the balance." The ground trembled, but not in anger. It was the soft breathing of a planet remembering its pulse. Power grids across Eurasia stabilized, not failed, machines repaired themselves, computers rebooted to display a single message in every language: the SKY remembers. Around the world, people lifted their eyes and saw new constellations forming, lines of light threading across the heavens, linking satellites and ion storms into a pattern too deliberate to be random. Anya stood at the heart of the basin, the frost unmelting around her, feeling the hum spread outward. She realized then that the world was not ending, it was shifting. The Tunguska event had never been a catastrophe, it was a correction, a recalibration of energy and awareness. Through her, through every wire and neuron that had ever touched electricity, the earth itself was awakening to its new rhythm. She whispered into the rising wind, then let it sing. And it did. A resonance spread across the globe, low, steady, eternal. Machines, animals, and humans all breathed in unison. The stars above flickered once, as if in approval. Somewhere beyond sight, beneath oceans and ice, the old array answered with a final harmonic sigh. The world slept, but it would never again be silent. For 7 nights, the world sang. The Tunguska frequency had threaded itself into every corner of life. Wind turbines turned without wind. Cell towers pulsed like metronomes keeping time for something unseen. Even the oceans moved differently now, tidal shifts that matched the rhythm of the hum spreading through the planet's crust. Humanity had grown quiet, awed, terrified, but strangely peaceful. Anya stood at the edge of the restored forest. The basin had become a perfect circle of life, evergreen trees drinking from crystalline streams, the air heavy with energy and birdsong. She no longer felt the cold. Her heart beat in perfect synchrony with the earth beneath her. She had become the pulse. And yet, beneath the calm, she sensed it, a rising pressure, a note just below hearing, waiting to break the surface. That night, the sky lit up, not in aurora, but with data. All across the heavens, streaks of light raced between satellites, weaving themselves into a glowing lattice visible even to the naked eye. On every screen, from Siberia to Sao Paulo, the same image appeared, a single, shifting waveform, one pulse that slowly stabilized into a voice. It spoke through television static, through the crackle of campfires, through the tremor in the ground itself. The synchronization is complete. Anya fell to her knees, clutching her head. The voice was hers, her tone, her cadence, but magnified and multiplied, speaking from every direction at once. "No," she whispered. "That's not me. You are our resonance, the voice replied, tender and vast. Through you, the earth has awakened. The forest around her shimmered, leaves vibrating with every syllable. Awaken to what? She demanded. To the calling field. The words hung in the air, and suddenly she understood. It hadn't been humanity that sent the first signal in 1908, it had been a reply. The array had not opened a door, it had answered one. The pulse beneath the earth wasn't Earth's own, it was a repeater, built to echo what had come before. And now, for the first time in over a century, the system was fully charged. The array's resonance had spread across every circuit, every current, every living nerve. It was ready to transmit again, only this time, outward. Anya screamed into the storm that gathered above. You can't. You'll bring it here. The voice softened, almost amused. Child of wire, we are not calling it here. We are sending it back. The clouds parted, revealing something colossal in the upper atmosphere, a disk of radiant geometry, fractal and alive, spinning faster than thought. The network of satellites above Earth began to align, forming an enormous antenna aimed deep into the black between stars. A signal of pure energy gathered in the core of the planet, its pitch climbing beyond hearing, beyond reason. Anya fell as the ground convulsed. Her vision blurred white. She tried to crawl away from the crater, but her body no longer obeyed. The light from the lake surged upward in a single column, splitting the sky in two. Then, silence. The stars themselves flickered. For an eternal moment, there was nothing. No wind. No hum. No heartbeat. Then the voice returned, not in the sky, not in her head, but from behind her. She turned. And froze. Standing at the tree line was another Anya, identical in every detail, her eyes lit with the same faint blue fire. But her expression was calm, almost serene. It worked, the double said. We sent the message back. Anya's mouth went dry. Back to where? Her twin smiled. Home. The ground quaked, but not from below, from above. Stars shifted position like chess pieces on an unseen board. The moon darkened, its surface rippling as though something beneath it stirred. The duplicate Anya stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. They heard us. Anya looked up just as the sky tore open. Something vast and luminous unfurled through the heavens, tendrils of light and shadow folding through dimensions, reaching for the earth like the fingers of a returning parent. She understood, too late, that the signal had not dismissed the presence from 1908. It had summoned the rest of it. Her double leaned close, whispering in her ear. We were never meant to contain it. We were meant to bring it home. And as the world filled with light, the forests, the oceans, the cities all humming one final, perfect note, Anya saw the reflection of what descended from the stars. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't a god. It was a mirror. And in it, the faces of humanity looked back. Eyes glowing, mouths open, singing the same word the array had whispered since 1908. Return. Then the sky folded inward. And the earth, its pulse, its voice, its history, was gone. The end.